logged in online, my colleagues and students. We are going to have a webinar today in the afternoon. The title is very tempting and very attractive. It's about a structural mismatch between economy and exchequer, a critique of fiscal architecture of India. I have not seen the paper, but I expect something substantial because I know the speakers. On the right hand is a person whom I know pretty well for almost 40 years. Left is a person who is knowing where Kerala stands today and facing the music on a daily basis. But when you talk about this particular fiscal architecture of India, we are immediately reminded of fiscal federal relations in India. And Indian fiscal federalism, undoubtedly, as I argued in my last seminar, was a plan which came from the seeds of Government of India Act of 1919 and 1935. And these seeds were quintessentially oriented towards or creation of a colonial ruler to keep the colonies under their control. So I am very sure that there is a possibility of substantial deficit in the developmental orientation in the Indian fiscal federalism. Because the both acts were quite unlikely to be developmental oriented. So Indian fiscal federalism also cannot be different. And any federations, mismatches are quite natural. And when it is that of a country like India, which is much more diverse than most continents in the world, mismatches are quite obvious. But then in such context, problems naturally get resolved through discussions and deliberations. So the soul of fiscal federalism is continuous dialogues and discourse. But unfortunately, I am of the view that in India, such dialogues and discourse happens once in 5 years. Just like about the budget, you have a discussion about a week or two, not even a week. 1 week, we are all active about budget, after that we forget. And similarly, about fiscal federalism also, while it calls for continuous dialogues, but we are not rising up to the expectation. We cannot put the blame on anybody else. We are responsible for it. And I think in that context, I'm I'm extremely happy to welcome two speakers of the day to deliberate on this relevant topic. And I take this occasion also to welcome all those who have, I'm not able to see those who are, all of you joined the name, but I know you are all our friends. And as I often say, gift, this is, we derive quite a lot of our energy from the presence and your suggestion, your encouragement, and that we value most, and we welcome all of you. And of course, my colleagues and students, you are also most welcome. So with this, I would request Professor Harilal and Professor Shaijan Davis to take the floor and go ahead.
Professor Joseph, Shaijan, and friends. Let me read out the title once more to draw your attention to the topic. Structural mismatch between economy and exchequer, a critique of the fiscal architecture of India. So we are trying to provide a critique of the fiscal system of the country. We will get started by problematizing fiscal equalization. It's very important because now we discuss quite a lot about fiscal equalization, what we mean by it, and the implications of it will have to be understood properly. In fact, no, the idea is that citizens of a country, wherever they stay, should be having access to equal amount of core public services. That's the idea. But if you are not having provinces or subnational governments, and if subnational governments are not having taxing powers, then fiscal equalization is not required. You have a nation, you have one taxing authority, revenue mobilizing authority, and there is no need for fiscal equalization across regions because regions are not there, regional governments are not there, regional fiscal establishments are not there. But in a federal country like India, we have this complication of subnational governments with different, supposed to be fiscal capacities. If fiscal capacity of states differ significantly, then there is need for fiscal equalization so that core minimum services are supplied everywhere, wherever the citizens stay. Now, what are these core minimum services? If you are going to equalize provision of public services across a country with different stages of development, then it's a problem because stage of development and size of government is a very important problem. You cannot have the same size of government, same type of government, and same type of public services being offered by state in different provinces, in different areas, because stage of economic development will be different. This problem will become a little more clear if you think about spatiality of development, spatial dynamics of development. When a capitalist economy grows, then there will be regional concentration of economic activity, capital, labor, population, everything will have a spatial dynamics. And it's quite natural to expect a concentration in cities, in urban areas, and then in some states where capitalist development is at a higher stage of development. Naturally, in such areas, for example, Indian cities, the nature of public services will be different. Cities cater to a different kind of clientele. So they need to have a different kind of public services offered. Whereas, in a remote area, public services are different. So that is why the emphasis on core minimum services, the drinking water, sanitation, education, public health, such core minimum services should be available everywhere. That doesn't mean that all services should be made available everywhere. Now, these issues are to be mentioned in the context of problematizing equalization, fiscal equalization, because these are very interesting problems that come up in the context of our discussion on fiscal equalization in the country, particularly in the context of the 16th Finance Commission's visit to states, which is happening now. Now, having said the background of our approach to fiscal equalization, now let us discuss about the role and size of state at different stages of development. Instead of going into theory, we have very detailed long period data on size of state across countries. And for developed countries, for more than a century, we have data on public expenditure. And everywhere it is clear that in developed countries, particularly OECD countries, the size of the state has been growing over time. And in some countries, the public expenditure to GDP ratio is more than 50%. You can see the data from 1972 to 2022 of major OECD countries. all along in most OECD countries, the size of the state has been growing. And as I was mentioning in a discussion in GIFT, they are too big. The developed country states in size are really very big. And in fact, now there is a famous Wagner's law, Wagner's hypothesis related to this, where uh, the uh, the growth or income, per capita income, is related to the size of government expenditure, size of government in general, and generally a positive relationship is seen, and large number of empirical studies are there. Maybe here or there, some studies see some kind of a deviation from the general law. But this particular table which I had shown, that itself is proof for growing, ever-growing size of government. And it shows, the in capitalist countries, in fact, the state sector is growing faster than the private sector, non-state sector, which is a surprise, because when we are speaking about market economies and not China or socialist countries where we know the size of the state will be very high. But in market economy countries, pure market economy countries who champion markets in the world, the size of the state has been growing, and very often it's growing faster than private capital, non-state sector, and reaches around 50% now, more than 50%. Now, what will be a Marxist kind of interpretation of this phenomenon? Marxists will say, in fact, no, we have a wrong idea that state is not really required. Market will take care of everything. Market is infallible beyond mistakes and all. But in fact, for capitalist economies to survive, you need to have a very strong state to protect property rights, threats against property rights which arise from abroad and from within. And most of the Marxists will be speaking about the vulnerability of the system because of the proneness to crisis. Capitalist system is known for periodic crisis. And if you want to manage the crisis and save capitalism, the state should be very strong to manage effective demand, etc., etc., etc. The state should play a very important role. Now, I'm not really going into a Marxist analysis of the growth of capitalist state, but the mainstream theory of economics, mainstream public finance theory itself explains this. The Musgravian, this stabilization, distributive functions, allocative functions. That itself is a good reason to explain the growth of state measured in terms of public expenditure to GDP ratio in most countries. Now, the interesting thing that we should underline, particularly when we discuss the growing size of the state in developed capitalist countries, is the fact that such growth in government investment, such growth in the public sector expenditure, in fact, didn't really crowd out private investment. The private sector was growing, private capitalism was growing, capitalism was growing, in spite of government investment, in spite of government playing such a very, very important role. And the elephant in the room was so big. But in spite of that, capitalism was surviving, markets were progressing. This is very important because the discussion changes its color the moment you come to the developing country context. That's why we gave this title "Changing Color of Economics." The picture from non-OECD countries is quite different. The size of the state measured in terms of expenditure to GDP ratios do not exhibit a clear rising trend. And it's more mixed the picture is more mixed if you can see this table. Whereas in the case of OECD countries, it's consistent growth. In the case of developing countries, there are some countries where the size of the state is growing. Some countries it's mixed, and a general, vague picture of the relationship emerges. But no, here the point that we should underline is this: the nobody says that the allocative function or distributive function or stabilization function is less important in the context of developing countries. Those theories or those explanations which try to sort of justify the growth of government expenditure in OECD countries, in fact, they are all applicable in the context of developing nations. But in spite of that, in developing countries, the size of the state has been coming down. And in the case of India, the combined size of the state, that is union government and state governments put together, they were increasing up to late 1980s. If you take a longer period, this is not a very long period. Early beginning of 1980s is put, but if you put earlier data, it will be more, the picture will be more clear. In any way, from late 1980s onwards, in the context of neoliberal reforms, the size of the Indian state, which used to grow up to 1980, started stagnating in the period since then. Now, so we bought this idea of crowding out, and now we sort of accepted the general impression that a big state is, in fact, it's inefficient, it's rent-seeking, and the size of the state should be less, and otherwise it will crowd out private investment. These kind of mainstream arguments, which mainly came from neoliberal sources, World Bank, IMF, international agencies, they had really influenced the public policy makers in third world countries in general. All over the third world countries, they attempt to reduce the size of the state. In fact, that was spread. And third world intelligentsia is enamored by the crowding out argument. Governments are more prone to corruption and inefficiencies. That's the argument. But only in third world countries. Otherwise, the mainstream economics should be able to answer this question. If students are asking you this question, why, sir, in the developed countries, the state is so big, and in developing countries, it should grow small. And we are given the idea that small is beautiful. In fact, this is the product of a colonial school which is dominating our policy making, and to a significant extent, even the mainstream academia and economists. Probably I'm also part of that. I'm not blaming others, but we wrongly got sort of consumed these ideas uncritically. But if you sincerely think, the case for a larger states, larger government expenditure is more valid in the context of developing countries. Now we know that in a young capitalist country, for a newly liberated country, the nascent capital will not be in a position to mobilize enough resources for developing the road network, for power supply systems, and many other sectors which are really required. Basic industries, heavy industries, other types of infrastructure, physical and even soft infrastructure. For laying foundations for all that, you need the public sector to play a very important role, and that is justified, and that is compared to developed countries. You have such a strong argument in the context of developed countries. Now, I would like to mention another point, which is very significant in the contemporary context of economic policy debates. We don't anymore see large number of firms in industries. The old models where now we discuss large number of firms operating, producing things. Hardly any industry. And we see global value chains dominated by large monopolies. Now, apparently, in one segment of the value chain, there will be large number of firms, large number of farmers producing a thing. But if you see the global chain encompassing those nodes, those chains are being dominated and governed by large firms who can control the entire chain, global chain. And now there is a growing debate on privatization of government. Why this question of privatization of government? Because all the major commodity chains are now being governed by large companies, large corporates, and they make the rules, they legislate, and they implement those rules. And disciplining is also done. And very often, in fact, the national governments are given the entitlement of controlling the citizens in favor of corporates which control the global value chain. Because now we say that no, we should enter the global value chain and there should be discipline of the global value chain. And the large companies are saying that no, this thing is required. So the governments, in fact, try to discipline the national players in the value chain so that no, they have access to the value chain. So the privatization of government is taking place in a big way. And there is another point. See, large companies, when they dominate global economy and national economies, if the size of the government is coming down, if the size of the government, a provincial government or national government is coming down, what will be the capability of governments to control the companies, control the economy? And this is a major problem. In fact, recently I was hearing some of the speeches of African leaders saying that no, companies operating in their countries, multinational companies, they are much bigger than the national governments. And it's extremely difficult for the national governments to even control their own politics, leave alone controlling the commodity chains. Even the national politics are being influenced by big companies. And this in the US presidential race, Jeff Bezos, he is threatening leaders of national governments, and he is intervening in war. And very soon they will have their own armies. Well, large companies can have their own armies, and they may have weapons because they have lot to protect also. They have a lot of interest to protect. Their capital to be protected in Africa, everywhere. So they will not leave it to the international system or political leaders. So given such a context, now I'm saying it's important to have a reasonable size for the government if the democracy is to survive. Now, I would like to take you back to the national liberation movements, the context of national liberation movements. Why we thought no, we should have freedom? Why we thought no, we should have independence? Because till then we didn't have the right to make government. And we wanted our government. And in India, no, we established our government through national liberation struggle. We established a government of the people, by the people, and for the people in India. That's democracy. That's why we were fighting for it. Now, after we won the government, the right to make the government, and we produced our government, but by around late 1980s, we were told, look, you don't need such a big government here. It can be a weak and small government. Because no, it's an indirect way of losing or taking away your freedom. Because no, the collective will of the people, collective will of the Keralites. It cannot be done through Adani. Collective will of the people will have to be implemented, realized through the government. And if the government is weak and disappearing because it's beautiful and small, then the will of the people will not have any meaning. The will of the large corporates, multinational corporates will ultimately rule. My point is, in the context of developing countries and small states, the size of the government is important. Now, and we know the pressure to reduce the size of the government in gift in front of the gift faculty. I don't need to really spend time explaining these points. I'll just quickly read through 1 or 2 points. The pressure to reduce the combined size of government expenditure and trade liberalization and loss of customs revenue. That's one of the reasons why the size of government revenue and government expenditure is coming down. FRBM Act, borrowing rights are lost. Concessions to big corporates, poor performance of GST revenue, and so many such reasons which we discuss in our meetings. No, that all that put pressure on the Indian government system to reduce itself, reduce its size. But then the central government, as we again discuss very often, central government doesn't want to take the burden of pain of reducing itself. So a major part of that pain is immediately transferred to the states by imposing stricter FRBM limits and taking away taxes. And the last source of tax, the GST itself also is taken. So the fiscal room available to the states are systematically taken away. Now, the desire to reduce the size of the government or the pressure to reduce the size of the government is immediately transferred to the state governments. And how it is done? So it is done over time and across space. That's very important. The size of India government should, or India's collective government should come down over time. That's one thing. Historically, it should come over time, it should come down. And then second condition is that spatially also, this principle of lower size of government should be implemented. That is the relationship between income, per capita income and expenditure, public expenditure. And that should be made negative, and across space that should be implemented. And that is what is happening in the area of fiscal equalization. It is achieved by two means: by establishing a negative relationship between devolution and per capita income of states, and then by establishing a clear disconnect between own tax revenue and per capita income of the states. So if these two things are achieved, the public expenditure of state governments, that is expenditure divided by GDP, should be negatively related to per capita income of states. And that's being achieved. And the results show that there is such a negative relationship in India getting established through two means. One, through fiscal equalization. In fiscal equalization, the devolution will be more to states with low per capita income and less to states with higher per capita income. So negative relationship is easily established in the case of devolution through finance commission. Then to complement that, the own tax revenue. Ideally, if you have a negative relationship, that's fine, but there is no very strong negative relationship, probably is not there, but there is a disconnect. There is a disconnect between per capita income or the economic growth, health of the economy, and public expenditure. And this is very clear from Shajin, that table can you show? No, the earlier table, economy and exchequer. This one. I don't know whether, can you focus it a little more? No. No, economy and exchequer. No. Yeah, yeah. See, here now we are in the first column now, the per capita GDP is arranged in a descending order. In a descending order, it's arranged. So highest per capita income state is Telangana, and second is Haryana. Like that, it's arranged. But if you take expenditure by GDP, see, expenditure by GDP is high in the case of Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand. So those states which are having low per capita income is having high expenditure to GDP ratio. So a negative relationship is established between the state, size of the state, public expenditure, and per capita income of the state. And this is true of the same relationship we can see in the case of capital expenditure. Capital expenditure also, if the state is economically healthy, if the per capita income is high, capital expenditure will be so much low. Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, etc., other relatively developed states will have lower capital expenditure. General government expenditure will be lower. And other variables also, you can see similar kind of relationship. And revenue by GSDP, tax revenue by GSDP also show a negative relationship. This is a very, very strange and surprising kind of result. That is, wherever state is having higher per capita income, wherever the state is doing well, their public expenditure will be less. Government revenue will be less. And that's why, the title of the paper, disconnect between exchequer and economy. Economy and exchequer indirectly, negatively related. So I'll just read out some of these points. Consequently, in India, we see a unclear relationship between own tax revenue and per capita income of states. And this is true of local governments also. In the case of local governments also, see, city governments like Hyderabad or Chennai or Mumbai, what is the connection between their exchequer and their economy, city economy? City economy may be prospering. You will have all multinational companies operating from there. They may be producing high income. But the city government cannot mobilize resources because there are no proper tax handles available to the city government. And this disconnect is seen in the case of states as well as city. So across states, wherever you have higher per capita income, the size of the state is low. State government expenditure as well as city government expenditure. And this is opposite of what we see in developed countries. And then we tend to complain about our cities. Whenever you go abroad, you see cities are there. And then when you come back, you see Indian cities, Mumbai or Chennai or Hyderabad or Trivandrum, anywhere. You will end up saying that no traffic block, unclean, all kind of congestions in the city. And that's because the city governments are not able to tax. They cannot tax their own economy. That's because of the disconnect. This is also true of the state governments. So the Indian fiscal system is moving into a very difficult direction where it is really limiting public expenditure where it should be high. Now, initially I was saying that in the case of fiscal equalization, you cannot. You are speaking about core services, core public services. But in cities and developed states, you should be able to go beyond core public services. In cities, for example, you need a lot of new generation public services. In Kerala, for example, it's a slightly developed state. So the state will have to go beyond core minimum services. You will have to have higher education. You will have to have modern transport, because capitalist development at a later stage really require, if it is to be sustained, many modern services. So the size of the state should be growing. Public expenditure should be growing in most of the cities and relatively developed state, but it's not happening. Now, I think, Chaitanya, can you show that? Then I'll come back.
Yeah, respected Chair and Professor Harilal. The story is well explained, in fact. Where we reached with his presentation is to prove the fact that when the economy is growing, but it is having a disconnect with the government expenditure, or the ability of the states or the governments, especially in the developing countries, to spend more, which is expressed by way of a variable called expenditure GSDP ratio for the Indian states. So what we have done is we have collected information from the World Development Indicators for the different countries, for the OECD and non-OECD countries. And for the Indian state to establish this relationship, we have taken information from the, say, Economic and Political Weekly Research Foundation. There's a data source, and the other one is the RBI. So using these information, in fact, we have done some cross-tabulation and two kinds of statistical exercise. One is a simple regression analysis, and second, a rank correlation analysis. Let me show you the results. One is this one, the effect of economic growth on government expenditure, by which we mean if a state in a particular state government, if the per capita income is growing, the log of per capita income, suppose that it is with what? Fine. Yeah. So these two, let me explain these two variables. One variable is the ratio variable, which is expenditure to GSDP. The other variable is the log of per capita income. So when the per capita income grows, what happens to here for the OECD countries, what happens to the expenditure GDP ratio? So for the set of countries we listed in the top portion, starting from Australia to the United States, it represents a clear positive relationship. That's what Professor Harilal has explained pretty well while he was discussing the theory and the other narratives, saying that in the OECD countries, the empirical results is also showing that when you grow, your economy is growing, the exchequer is also growing. There is a direct connect, in fact. But there are exceptions. In fact, in Sweden, Chile, there is an exception which has to be looked in a different way. And there are certain other countries where the relationship is also not strong. But in most of the countries listed above, after the 20 countries we analyzed, we find a positive and significant relationship between the two, meaning the connect between the economy and the exchequer. This is a very interesting result when we did the same analysis for the non-OECD countries. Of course, you may find, except Thailand, India, Indonesia, Korea, South Africa, Ghana, Mexico, and Pakistan, for all the countries except Thailand, we don't find any relationship between the rate of growth of the economy and the size of the government. So this is what is being explained so far is called the disconnect for the developing countries or the non-OECD countries. When come back to the Indian states, we have information from, in fact, we have taken for the 40-year period from 1982 to 2022-23. And what we have done is we have done a rank correlation for different periods, for these 5 periods. Why this periodization? In fact, we have started from the latest period, 2022-23, and have gone back to the 10-year before, 12-13, and again 10-year before, 2002-3, again 10-year before, and again 10 year, just to have a decadal comparison. So what we have done is a 5 rank correlation between the per capita GSDP and the size of the government. Let me say size of the government. So this result shows the Spearman rank correlation. This shows that the relationship is negative. It's a clear result which says that except for 1980 to 83, for all other time periods, it's a significant negative relationship. It means that it's a clear disconnect. When your economy is growing, when you are having higher and higher per capita GSDP, you are not able, your exchequer is not higher enough to spend more.
It's negative.
It-
More than disconnect. Here it is clear negative, no?
Yeah, it's negative, correct. So the number of observations vary. In fact, in some of the years, we did not get information for all the states. That's why the number of observation is different for different periods. And the same is repeated for the on-tax revenue of all the states. What happens to the on-tax revenue as percentage to the GSDP in comparison with the per capita income, per capita GSDP, where we have the results show that there is no relationship, again, a disconnect. The power of the states, Indian states, to generate more revenue on tax revenue is being limited when your economy is grown. So this has to be in fact discussed utilizing much more time. In fact, why is the case that in among the Indian state, are you as an Indian or as India as a country is advocating for a situation where when your economy is growing, you should not generate more revenue or you should not spend more. This is something, a different kind of a disconnect relationship that we expect. I hand over to Professor Harilal to conclude.
See, this can only be done to an enemy country. Actually. If an enemy country is given the control over Indian fiscal system, you will deny the growth centers maximum. See, growing states and Indian cities, urban areas, they are given less money and they are not able to tax enough. As a result, the developed regions, the progressing regions are able to spend less compared to the lagging regions. So public expenditure is behaving in a very unsustainable way. Maharashtra cannot invest in higher education, research, innovation, and many new areas because the exchequer is not allowing it to do that. One reason is, of course, the fiscal equalization. Of course, if the poorer regions, backward regions should be given more resources. And for the sake of equity, it can be justified. It is done like that. But the problem is the real villain is not that. We all support equity and equalization, fiscal equalization. But the real villain is to be seen one step beyond. That is one step ahead. That is the capacity to tax. The real fiscal ability. That's where the problematizing of fiscal equalization is very important. Why fiscal equalization? Because regions, states are having different fiscal capacity. So those regions which is having a lot of fiscal capacity can be given less. That is justified. Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, they are rich economies. They can tax a lot. They have high fiscal capacity. So let us give them very little. That is justified. But what is the situation? The richer states, in fact, no, they cannot mobilize resources. They cannot mobilize own tax resources. And that is a strange thing. Higher the per capita income, there is no significant positive relationship as far as own tax is concerned. It's almost negative. And this finding, in fact, no, is related to the paper earlier done by Mohan and Shaijan in CDS about services tax, and also Joseph and Kiran's work on GST, how GST revenues are behaving across the states. It's very simple. Like, what is the relationship between economy and exchequer? You should have taxes which can really mobilize resources from buoyant economic activities. You don't have income tax. Personal income tax is not there. Corporate income tax is not there. And other taxes which can really tax the corporates or private agents which lead development, which benefit out of development, or which create maximum pollution. There is no way the state government or city government can tax them. City governments cannot tax polluters. City government cannot tax those who benefit maximum out of city services. You complain against mayor, but how can the mayor cannot tax the corporates, the hospitals which create pollution? So there is a real disconnect between own taxes of city governments, of urban areas, of state governments, which is a very, very serious sustainability question as far as the Indian fiscal system is concerned. And evidence is showing that very clearly. When I explained this to some of the Finance Commission members, no, I told no, we are getting such results. Then he told me, this is counterintuitive. I can't believe this. Very friendly, not a hostile kind of response. They were all very friendly. Then I told no, we were also surprised. In fact, no, we were surprised to see these results. When we initially ranked and seen how these two, the per capita income ranking and public expenditure ranking and own tax, it's unbelievably moving in the opposite direction. And it's reality. This is the reality of Indian system. And after having seen your study on GST and earlier service tax questions and other research here in gift and all, I think now we are, what is counterintuitive is real. That's a problem. It's counterintuitive, but this is happening in India. Now, so how to solve this problem? That's in the context of Finance Commission visit and all, that's the big question. No? You have an unsustainable fiscal arrangement in the country. It's partly because of fiscal equalization. And more than that, it is the taxing capacity of the states. How to reform it? Ultimately, you need to have the taxing system, the fiscal system of there should be substantial reform so that the city governments and the state government can have some kind of access to economic activity to tax and mobilize resources in a positive way, so that when the economy grow, their exchequer will also grow. That relationship should be established can be established only by tax reforms, which is not going to come very soon. But an economist can only advise this. You need to really change your taxing system so that the provinces are meaningful and the local governments are rational. Now, some solutions for discussion we are suggesting. That is one immediate amendment of the Constitution to allow raising of upper limit of professional tax. The local bodies, they can tax professional and they have professional tax, but for a long period of time, the upper limit cannot be. It's fixed by the Constitution, and the previous Finance Commission also said no, it should be relaxed. Now, see, the Indian system doesn't want the rich people to pay, because the moment they increase the professional tax, they fear that the rich will be against the state, and it will ultimately affect the income tax also. So this is a long pending demand for local bodies to survive. So this should be amended. Then after having seen the fiscal sharing system in other countries, in fact, no, in many countries, income tax, corporate tax and all, a part of that is given directly before fiscal equalization to the provinces, states. And this may sound a bit too much, but then in fact, no, it's very rational in the context of the kind of discussion, kind of evidence that we see. Personal income tax collected from state government employees at least. Personal income tax collected from state government employees to be given to the state governments. And because now the collection can be done by the central government. And anyway, from the state exchequer, this income is going to the state employees. And it's not a very substantial amount to worry the central government, but to make state governments meaningful functionaries in the fiscal system. Such a reform can be thought of, or else we should come out with more suggestions. Then, of course, is the GST reforms. I don't need to explain that point in detail in Gulati Institute. In fact, now we should be working more on GST reforms. How to simple to major changes in the GST system, how it can be used to help, because now these taxes were taken away from the state governments. Now state governments doesn't have any fiscal power. It's an agency of implementation. Central government will give money, you spend some money. It's a project implementing agency. And reforms are required, and we are all convinced about it. Details will have to be worked out. But that should be posed, I think, not in the memorandum, but in various other ways, we'll have to continue this discussion. Nationwide implementation, and this is a suggestion I made when I met the Finance Commission members. Many of them welcomed it, but then a lot of discussions were also there. A nationwide implementation of pollution tax, proceeds of which flowing to the local governments. See, I was telling that the city governments, Indian city governments, they cannot tax their own economy, the local economy. The one way of reaching the local economic activity is to make the polluters pay. And that can be done. In fact, no, we have done some inquiry about it earlier also. That is, no, like income tax returns of corporates and individuals. Every medium and large establishment, not only factories, shopping complex, restaurants and all, they should be made to file a waste return, production of waste and management of waste return every year. And it should be a simple thing. Some format, simple format can be there. And environmentalists have developed standard formats, like if it is a hospital, if you know the number of beds and outpatient and inpatient strength, you can calculate the standard waste which will be generated by hospital. This is true of hotels. This is true of shopping malls and all. So using that, now you can have an idea about the waste that will be generated, and a beginning of taxing the polluters, for better air quality, water quality, etc., that can be done, and that will strengthen subnational governments, particularly the local government. And the other thing is, it's important to be suggested to the Finance Commission of India, because the moment Kerala starts a pollution tax, there'll be competition among Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and other states. So a pollution tax can be implemented only across states. So there should be a national drive, because polluters are continuing to pollute, and an individual householder is treated the same way as somebody who's polluting because of factory or because of a large mall. The other thing is introduction of urban population into the devolution formula. We have suggested this to the, no, I mean, as an idea, not as a government memorandum or anything, for discussions. We have, the last table, Shaijan, can you please? What, no, not the last, earlier, yeah. That population distribution, we should be familiar to the researchers in GIFT, but see, if you take distribution of population in general, and then aged population, urban population, etc., you can see Kerala having a higher proportion in the case of urban population and higher population in the case of aged population. So if you distribute 100 rupees, if you are distributing 100 rupees among Indian states, if you use the aged population, Kerala will be getting a higher share. Similarly, urban population. This urban population is related to the spatial dynamics of development, where the Indian economy is shifting, Indian production is focusing, population, labor, everything is concentrating into urban areas. And in the urban areas, you need all kind of new services to be given. And for such governments to be supported, you can use the urban population where the ratio is very high for, and other urbanized states will be benefiting. Tamil Nadu will be the first state to benefit. And Tamil Nadu has raised this point. In Stalin's media release, he was mentioning about urbanization. I don't know whether they have given the urban population. We have made some calculations using this. So these two, if we introduce, it will benefit certainly Kerala. And of course, in the case of local governments, devolution index can be introduced, and then all lot of special problems, which I don't need to really spend time discussing here. Now, we have been discussing in various, and you have all written papers on many of these aspects. So it will be too much from my part to really speak about those things. Population also, I've seen the studies here done by our scholars in GIFT. So I'll stop here, and then we thought, Shaijan and I thought we should present this in GIFT, not because this is going to contribute to the proposal government of Kerala's demand and all. But no, we thought, no, anyway, this is Finance Commission Eve, and we will get a response from you people, public finance scholars. Some of the response can be now, and many others can come later. You can write to me, because I want to clarify my
thing. I think they deserve. I think this is I was warned not to introduce him before talking, so I didn't introduce it. But at least I must say that this is an excellent beginning by our chairman of the 7th Finance Commission. I think your concern, and a person who has been involved with the decentralized development from mid-90s, he has been spending a lot of time on that. And later,
I'll see, in fact, there's a story, fiscal equalization, this idea, generally, in a very raw form. And Professor K.K. Subramaniam, in honor of Professor Subramaniam, we organized a seminar in Ahmedabad. I presented the crude ideas
at
there.
that time, I remember.
I used to discuss with Shaijan, and that one chapter was given, that book never came. But I used to discuss with Shaijan, and Shaijan encouraged me to, otherwise I would not have. And he has put in more thought and sort of pushed me around. So
Right.
that,
I think it's a very interesting, very challenging. I mean, both of them, that sense of the term. Shaijan, you must be knowing that he has done substantial work on state finances. And he, with his previous hat as member planning board in charge of decentralization, and today he's a bigger role. This terrible combination has indeed produced an incredible output. I'm very much inclined to say something now. I think I would like to keep the floor open to begin with, because I have temptation to talk, but let me control myself. The floor is open, and after that, We always respect people online because online people today, the world is more online, Swiggy. So you are more important. You can always, you will be given first preference.
Online is real.
Online,
And
is
really
real. Online, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Are you leaving?
Yeah.
Go on. Okay, yeah. Okay, I think I'm not. I don't think that I have many questions and any question at all. But I think why don't I go to come inside? I think that I think you people ask question because I. What is open here? Yeah. Okay. Issue. Use the mic, please, because people are online. They.
When you're talking of fiscal equalization, that creates an unequal situation at the state level, isn't it? So some states will benefit, and in that situation, how this disconnect is uniformly applicable to states. Some states are actually benefiting, isn't it? But that's not coming in your.
There are two aspects to a state's revenue and state's ability to spend. One is the money devolved through the finance commission. The other is own taxes. So fiscal equalization will naturally benefit relatively backward regions, and resources will be flowing from higher per capita income states to lower per capita income states. That's the purpose of fiscal equalization. But here the complication is the own tax revenue. So you have, through fiscal equalization, you are establishing a negative relationship. And then own tax revenue is very limited. And there is a lack of connect. So fiscal equalization is brought in to really correct the ability to fiscal capacity differences. So the assumption is that states have differences in fiscal capacity among. There are states which can mobilize a lot of resources. There are states which cannot mobilize so much resources. That is why fiscal equalization is brought in to correct this mistake. But the problem is the fiscal capacity. Fiscal capacity is not that much varying. Higher per capita income states are having higher fiscal capacity, but that advantage is taken by the central government through their taxes. And the high income states are not having tax handles to really reap revenue from better performing local economy. That is true of cities also. That is why the.
But this is already given because constitutional provisions, it gives very limited maneuverability for the subnational government and local governments. So you are suggesting constitutional amendments for this. If that is the case, why do you want to tinker at the marginal issues like professional tax and all those things? You reform the GST. Because GST, that is what is substantially benefiting the states.
That's what I'm saying. If there is a fundamental problem, there is no doubt about it. And this basic problem can be addressed only by changing the taxing powers and the fiscal system as a whole in the country. And one main area is the GST system. Because before the introduction of GST, the state governments had some power, better power to tax the local economy. That was lost now. That is lost now. So constitutional reform, or even otherwise, the reform of the taxation system is the real solution to the problem. But that doesn't mean in front of the Finance Commission when we speak about this disequilibrium or mismatch, we should not be suggesting more practical things. No, the constitutional reforms or reform in the tax system will take time, and it will be whereas this thing, this professional tax, professional tax is a real possibility for many of the city governments to really make money. Kochi or Trivandrum can improve its tax, or any local government for that matter. The professional tax will improve. This is the proportion is very big in the case of Mumbai, Chennai, and all. They are all starved. In fact, our cities are not having modern administration. Technically qualified town planners and such manpower is not there. So how can you blame these systems? Unless they are. So that's why the professional tax is important. That's also why the urban population. Urban population, if you take urban areas, the urbanized states will benefit. Tamil Nadu will benefit, Gujarat will benefit to some extent, Maharashtra will benefit, Haryana will benefit. These are the states which are having, the contradiction. The economy is doing well, but the exchequer, their tax collection is not doing well.
Still, I'm again getting back to the onliners. I could see, I think Professor Devaraman. I think yes,
Yeah, it's Devi Raman.
yes.
One and only Professor Devi Raman.
Dr. Devaraman, please unmute your mic. This is something terrible that somebody muted you. That is, the respected planning board member has been muted by someone. That we can't stand it. We register. You have to unmute by yourself. You have to unmute by yourself. You have to unmute. Eh? But the audio problem. Don't worry. Okay, okay. We hope you are hearing us. Not our problem. That problem is from there.
Hello.
Yeah. Please, Hari.
Yes, sir.
Over to you.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. So, first of all, I would like to congratulate both of them for this opportunity and wonderful explanation. But few things which I felt is that when you talk about the OECD countries' experience, I was expecting something on the tax revenue mobilization part also. When you talk about the size of the government, the revenue side also matters because they have been successful in mobilizing the resources which was reflected later. But I was expecting even at least a passive mention in the beginning itself when you were explaining about the OECD economies. Other thing is that with regard to the suggestions, some of them looks very novel in terms of income tax being shared with the state government. So I was fearing whether this will lead to some kind of a tax competition, because that is another angle which we may have to think about in state context, where because to start with state government employees it may not be, but if we largely means expand it later, there is a potential of a tax competition, because in India almost 4 to 5 states only contribute more than 60% of the income tax. If you Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu, if we take together, they almost contribute 60% of the tax revenue. So in that context, these kind of suggestions, how feasible it will be in a larger perspective, I'm little bit doubtful. But regarding the professional tax, I think only few states are pushing it, because if there is going to be a collective bargaining from all the, if Kerala can take the lead in that bargaining, because this was being proposed by 12th Finance Commission, then 14th Finance Commission, I think they have proposed for 10,000 as the limit for that professional tax. Or even we can have a progressive professional tax also. Maybe like income tax, we can suggest for a progressive kind of professional tax where higher salaried people can be taxed in a different slab. So these all, I think, because in Kerala you are sitting and there the local governments or the self-governments are very stronger. But I think in other states, there is a bargaining, means loss of bargaining. I think if you can take the lead, I'm sure other states may also be happy. This is in the another context also, because some states like Maharashtra, if I look, where you are talking about the fiscal space thing, but in some states, even though fiscal space is available, they are not in a positive approach towards expenditure. I think those cases also this paper can bring out, because Maharashtra specifically, I can tell, if you look at the fiscal deficit per se, you can see never crossed say 2.5 or 2.7% since the FRBM. So they are always being like a conservative way of spending. So they never used fiscal space or fiscal deficit as a progressive, mean a positive thing, because in developing countries, as we all argue, fiscal deficit have a major role in terms of, because deficit, we cannot talk it in terms of negative, but we also always have to take it in a positive sense, that we have to spend more to grow more, or say develop more. So in that context, I think some states are very conservative also. So that I think maybe few experiences also you may have to look it into little bit into details, nuances of their things. No, so I think that may also contribute, bring in, because these are some of the states that are having larger or better bargaining power. No, when it comes to the central state financial relation. So these bigger or the traditionally stronger states have a relatively better bargaining power. So in that context also, we may have to, I think, reorient a little bit. Anyway, thank you for this opportunity. And the last point which I want to raise, which again I felt, I don't know whether it is still significant or not, it is with regard to the tax collection efficiency again. So if you are talking about the any form of indirect tax, so that comes to whether there is still potential for improvement in terms of tax collection efficiency. Because ideally, because since Harilal Mash is giving novel suggestion, I would like to add one more, is that some of the white goods, if I am purchasing, say for example, some commodities that are above 50,000 or 1 lakh rupees, because most of the mobile phones above 1 lakh people purchase these days. So these commodities, if I purchase a good, and at least when the next cycle, when that trader pays the GST, at least I should be acknowledged by the taxes department with a SMS that thank you for giving this much amount as the GST. So that in a way, I think will be a cross check whether that trader has paid the tax also. So that way, if I means a law, minimum maybe 1 lakh or 50,000, that can be decided. So we are all living in an AI driven in this economy. So this stage of technology, I'm sure this is possible, because at the end of the year, we get from the income tax department, every quarter we get a message, thank you for paying this much income tax. So like that, if at least a higher, larger sum, if I pay, say for gold, or for, say for TV or car, if I purchase, for example. So that taxes, whether it is being credited to government account or not, as a taxpayer, I have no means to verify that. So if since Dr. Shaijan is also there, so some measures, if at least some novel approach Kerala government can take forward, I will highly appreciate it. Thank you.
Joseph, sorry.
We have been waiting for such a long time. Please.
Yeah, yeah, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I mean, it's really interesting to hear, what Professor Harilal and Shaijan have been saying. I think I have a couple of concerns. One concern is that, given the fact that there is big difference between what is called the tax GDP ratio between OECD countries and a country like India, and also for that matter, Kerala, will it be much meaningful if we compare these two sets of countries? Because the OECD countries, the tax GDP is more than 40, whereas in India it is hardly 11 or 12, and in Kerala again it is hardly 8 or 7. So, these comparisons, I don't think may be quite meaningful. The second thing is that it is true that, you can easily empirically establish the disconnect, and which you have done beautifully. I would suggest so. But the moment when you say disconnect, what one would be more interested to hear is what exactly is the agency which is mediating this disconnect, the agency working behind this disconnect. And in order to know that, one should go for the nature and character of the state. And in that context, if your basic idea is to bring more benefits to those states having high per capita income but less what is called the transfer of resources, you will have so many other options. So, for instance, in India, there was a massive cut in corporate tax from 30% to 22%. And for new enterprises, it was hardly 12%. What does it mean? It means that there was a drastic reduction of resources to divisible pool, which implies that there is also a reduction of transfer or resources from divisible pool to states. States, including those states having what is called high per capita income. So the point, if your solution is to go for what is called more resources to those states having a higher per capita income, then you have better solutions. That's my point. So the third point is that, don't you really think that the real villain is the nature and character of the state, which wouldn't allow you to tap the actual taxable capacity of the state, which in turn reflects both. One is the inefficiency of the state, and the other is the nature and character of the state itself. Sorry for that. Yeah.
You don't mean Kerala, I suppose, here, state, excluding Kerala. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else from the online? Otherwise, these two answers. Yeah. Yeah, we'll ask.
Shall I respond to
this?
this? Okay, in fact, no, being Hari on the armchair, such an young person,
Not answering.
such an
This is the
young
old,
person
yes.
becoming an armchair intellectual. But no, when he started speaking, he is not an armchair intellectual, but very sharp. Anyway, the question whether the income tax suggestion, that is income tax of government employees to be plowed back to the state government itself, whether it could lead to a tax competition. That's a genuine concern. I also thought about it. But here the suggestion is that no, the income tax slabs, everything will be determined by the central government. State governments are not going to intervene in tax collection. Simply it's that as far as government employees, state government employees are concerned, that part of income tax which they mobilize, that can be transferred to the states. And that's one way the prosperity of the state can be flowed back to the state itself, state exchequer itself, so that the disconnect can be addressed to some extent. But if the state is given the taxing powers, income tax powers, then there will be immediately possibility of competition coming in and spoiling the whole show. That's a genuine concern, but should be taken care of. And then about professional tax, yeah, there is agreement. In fact, no, commission after commission, they are making the suggestion that professional tax, the ceiling limit should be increased, but nothing is happening. As a result, you think about local governments. Local government, what are the taxes available to them? One is property tax, the second is professional tax. Then some other minor things. So the local government establishment should be run, and they are depending on grants from the state government. State governments are in a bad shape. And for growth, Bangalore city, if it is performing bad, then our IT industry will be suffering. The nation as a whole will be suffering, and this should be registered, the people think about growth, this, that, but cities of the country, major cities of the country, they are starved of funds. And then after a while, people get accustomed to that. Urban administration will become accustomed to that. So if it is unclean, if it is stinking, if congestions are there, people get adjusted to that. City government, okay. But now you go to these cities, they're unbearable, so bad, Indian cities. It's because of this thing, and that should be raised. That's the job of economists, but we should be raising that. And as Hari rightly told, Kerala can play a role, and we should link to the inconvenience and difficulties in the city and the tax system, and then only we can convince the central government to make the amendment. Now they are thinking that those people who are having income, all the tax we can take, and profession tax will mean some tax will be taken away by the city governments. Why? That conviction should be changed, and that can be done only by coming together of states and city governments. And the last point is about GST reforms. It is too ambitious to think that I paid for a white good and there should be an SMS coming to me that you paid and thanks for that. Yeah, it's true that income tax, the system is more improved. In the case of GST, not only Hari or me, we will not know anything, but even the state government will not know. That's what the gift scholars are saying. The system is so bad. The system is so bad. The individual taxpayers will not know, and the state government also will not know much about how whether the tax is paid and whether the trader had really paid. That shows that there is a long distance to go as far as GST administration is concerned. So reforms means GST reform also in various ways. And coming to Professor Ravidaman's comments, yeah, I do agree that the nature of state play a very, very important role. If you really dig deep into the problems which we see in the outer ring, you will have to you can really, dig it back to the nature of the character of the state. So Indian state is not very keen that preference tax is collected or other tax possibilities are pursued. And he was mentioning about the corporate income tax. Corporate income tax, a lot of concessions are given. Concessions are even the GST. Economists are saying that there should be only one rate. That is against any kind of equity norm. And economists of the country, they are saying that for making the system more simple for all consumer goods, you should have only one rate. And that's the level to which we are going down. And we are having AI. Somebody mentioned AI. When we didn't have AI and all, we had so many rates. And now, because now we have computers, AI, all computational ability, so we think that there should be only one rate. And that shows the nature of the state. You don't want to be discriminatory in favor of the poor. And yeah, what Ravi told is right. But then his suggestion about OECD, and both Ravi and Hari mentioned about OECD data. In fact, that's a big mine of data, and in fact, there are large number of studies. In fact, I have taken, I have a good collection of studies on this relationship between state expenditure, state revenue, public revenue, and income and all. So that can be pursued. These questions can be pursued, and certainly it will be rewarding if we do. And Shaijan is very busy, but in spite of his, he did a lot of empirical kind of work. Many of these things we have not reported. It's a work in progress, and it will be taken up.
Hari, I would like to tell you a story. I
ഒരു
recently
കാര്യം
bought
മാത്രം.
yeah, please.
Just minor points. In fact, the very paper has got delayed only because of my absence from the mainstream. My memory is correct. This was started in 2011, 12, or 13. The initial idea, it was originated with 10, minimum of 10 years before. But
It's a very old, it's a very old wine. Please.
Yeah. But to engage in the discussion, especially the points pointed out by Hari, one valid point, the fourth point you mentioned is very valid, and I buy the argument that there are certain states which have the spending capacity, they have the resources with them, but they may not be, they may be acting as conservative, they may not be spending, and Maharashtra itself may be a good example of that. Many are, may not be. I think even there are even poor states. There are even poor states or not rich states also not spent. But for that, I think we must ask the question: why? From 2006 onwards, we have an argument for that. I think you may remember the article by Isaac and Ram Kumar appeared in Economic and Political Weekly. The very title of the article is that why do the states not spend? So from that, if you take that cue from that, it may mean that your FRBM Act and the new fiscal responsibility kind of restrictions imposed on the powers of the states, some of the state at least are they fear to spend. They want to limit their deficit indicate to achieve the deficit indicators.
The propaganda,
Yeah.
the propaganda, no, generally the propaganda against state expenditure, the private capital can grow, they can go do anything, but any initiative from the government is spoiled by various kinds of comments in the journalists. It's inbuilt into our, it's wired into our brain that states should be small and it should not be active.
Kiran.
Thank you, sir, for a stimulating presentation. And I will particularly take on that disconnect that you have highlighted. Sir, I think you could also articulate in terms of declining fiscal space for states to spend, because here you have a scenario where the high income states, as you have shown, and we also strongly believe, and studies after studies show that per capita income does not yield own tax revenues, and that is becoming very clear. And on the other hand, because you have a higher per capita income, you are losing in terms of the devolution share. That means the total revenue space for these states is lower, right? And that is perhaps the reason why they are constrained to spend. Okay. And if you also plot one more variable, just look at the debt to GDP ratio and find the rank correlation. If that rank correlation is also negative, I think your story will become even more powerful.
In fact, it's true. From the data, just by having the evaluation is clear. But no, these are the ways.
Okay, left side.
Thank you for the thought-provoking discussion, sir.
Yeah, Ashwati,
Yeah.
please.
In connection to the previous arguments regarding comparison with the OECD and non-OECD countries, basically the macroeconomic challenges and macroeconomic problems of these countries are very different. So the whole question of deficit, inflation, all those things are very pertinent to non-OECD countries or developing countries. So instead of taking that, isn't it better if we take the nature of relationship between public and private expenditure with respect to the social overhead capital? So if you refer the previous existing studies, basically this relationship is yielding a substitute kind of relationship with respect to developed countries, whereas it is complementary in the developing economies. So public expenditure, suppose on education or health versus private expenditure on education or health. So in this kind of a relationship, it is yielding a substitute kind of relationship when you do it for the developed economies. But for the developing economies, it is yielding a complementary relationship. So which makes the case stronger for the size of the government. So if it is complementary, so if the private sector, I mean, it will not crowd out, rather it will crowd in. So that kind of an argument may be strengthening for the size, increasing the size of the government for developing economies. Thank you.
The argument for a strong and bigger state, argument for higher public expenditure, they are all reasonably more, valid in the developing country context. And this complementarity of public and private investment should be, greater in developing countries. There's no doubt about it. But your concern about macroeconomic problems also. See, in fact, the whole resistance against public investment is related to the macroeconomic management. And macroeconomic management is related to your policy towards capital market, towards external sector management. And because of this disturbance in the external sector, whenever you go for an external assistance, whenever you open up your capital market, then the need to really control inflation, control public expenditure, everything is coming, and many developing countries are caught in that rut. And such countries which get caught, they lag behind. But those countries which are not bothered about that and have capital control and all, any developing country, for example, for that matter, which had really come up in development, they have, they didn't take the advice that the government should be small and all. China is one example, and many other non-socialist countries also are examples of yeah.
Shamna, you have any, you're okay? Comfortable? Okay, then you're comfortable in asking, you're not comfortable with, yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, when we discuss about the fiscal equity,
Switch
here,
on, please
yes,
keep your mic on.
okay. Yes, mic on. When we discuss about fiscal equity, I would like to expose that what Buchanan showed by fiscal equalization. He meant that equal treatment of equals or equal treatment for person dissimilar in no relevant respect. That means he mentioned that it should not be mere distribution of resources from high income state to low income state. For this, he mentioned that it should be based on fiscal residuum. Fiscal residuum means the difference between what individual contribute in taxes and values of public service they receive. Truly, it shows the fairness in distribution than just equalizing across region. Buchanan, in his theory of federalism, it's mentioned. It must be based on that. Just to add that.
Essentially, very,
Fiscal equalization.
yeah, that's right. Okay. Ranjit, I was actually looking for you for quite some time.
Sir, this is just I thought about it when you present. I mean, maybe you would have thought about it and you would have incorporated it in your write-up. Sir, you raised a proposition saying that there's a disconnect between the state exchequer and the economy. But there are many channels through which it can have positive relations, it can have a negative relation, and it can have a disconnect. Because we have a lot of theories, starting from Wagner's different versions of Wagner hypothesis, Keynesian framework, growth equations, and all that. So suppose, I mean, if you could articulate in a way that, okay, there is a first set of argument where a clear positive relationship between economy and exchequer, by supporting any of this theoretical framework. And the second proposition, there is a disconnect by connecting, there is a negative relations by connecting neoclassical or something. And the third version is yours. It would have been, little more uh, interesting or effective to put your argument, and in between that channel, the mechanism, how it is positively affecting, how it is negatively affecting, how is disconnect. That channel, which is the disconnecting channel, that if you could add, it would have been little more. You would have thought it about it. And regarding the empirical side, I didn't get some clarity about the methodological framework and empirical strategy. It is directly from any of the theoretical framework. Maybe you have some theoretical framework. Based on that, you would have developed. It's a time series way of regression, or any sophisticated model or endogeneity issue.
For the countries which we have shown for the OECD and non-OECD, this is a time series regression for each country separate, and
Time period?
for from 1972 to 2022-23, so about 50-year period. So time series is good enough. And for the DW, I have not explained this statistical thing and all. We have done this Price-Winston AR1 process and all. This is modified version of this Cochrane or Cook model, so as to get a because the original DW is much below 2. So for getting the adjusted DW, we have done this iterations using the Price-Winston.
No, most of the coefficient is above 1. I thought like there was an endogeneity issue or something like that.
No, but this AR1 is corrected. Let me see again.
Okay, but this when you put this Wagner's hypothesis and all, there is a strong endogeneity relation between growth and expenditure.
Let me see.
You have to be worried about endogeneity only if you are interested in causal relationships. If not, association is fine.
This is not causal, in fact.
Yeah.
Okay, your point regarding connections between the two. There are different theoretical positions. In the context of OECD, in the context of other countries, how the expenditure, public expenditure, government size in general is related to the growth or per capita income. There are alternative approaches, but basically, that connect will have to be established by the government through various process of mobilization of resources. So if the government at the provincial level, if they don't have tax handles to connect, then it's a straightforward thing. But if you're speaking about a national economy, and if the state is not keen to evolve tax handles or taxes to really reap the advantages of economic growth for government exchequer and public expenditure, that's a question of the question related to the nature of the state. But the story is very clear in the case of capitalist countries. Even in the case of capitalist countries, the state is very active in mobilizing resources. The state is active in spending also, and they don't see any contradiction. And there is no crowding out. See, the private capital there is interested. In many of the areas, the private capital is looking for state investment.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. And the state investment in R&D, state investment in defense, everything is helping a private capital, and that connect is established, and there is the commonality of purpose between the state and capital, because the state is run basically by capital if you go by the political economy route.
But so in OECD countries, the channel is because they have the revenue space, they are able to spend higher amounts. The role of state could be high. But in our case, when you look at the Indian states, first of all, there's a revenue constraint that the states are facing. That is what is visible from their own tax revenues. Yeah. Yeah.
The thing
And
is,
because there's no fiscal space, they are not able to spend.
the thing is, in developed countries, over a long period of time, when their economies were at a lower state of development, their tax collection was less or their public expenditure was less. But when the economy grew, the state also grew. In relative sense also, and they're spending more, and they're not crowding out public and private investment. Private investment is also happy because otherwise it will not happen like this. Private investment is happy, and public investment in various areas, it's really contributing to the growth of the private sector, accumulation of capital that is facilitated by the state. But here we are given a theory. And we believed that the smaller the state, it's great for all of us. The growth will be, but it's not happening in Africa, where all these rules and regulations were obeyed. Latin America, they are not really getting out of this problem, and the same is the case of India. And 30 years ago, what was the shape of Indian railways, and what is the shape of China, and what is the shape of Vietnam, and South Korea also. In all such developing capitalist countries, market economy countries also, the state is playing a very, very, very important role, which helps private capital also. But in India, the story is different. It's my take, but no, we can.
Take is it that state doesn't want to play a role, or is it because state is constrained to play a role?
There is, of course, constraint.
And are these
there?
State is certainly concerned now because of the neoliberal policies. Once the state accepted these policies, naturally they are constrained by their own policies.
Okay.
The problem is very often the capitalists may not know the right thing that the state should do for their own welfare and benefit, their own growth. So very often the state takes a position which should be helping capital, and it's rightly taken in developed countries. But our capital probably is not independent enough, to decide on what is good for us. And some sections of Indian capital may be interested in going the other way, because now even if India is going down, they make profit. So such complications are there and not very simple. Of course, no. It's very interesting to see why such negative relationship exists at the level of states, and why Indian state is indifferent to this question. Why economists are indifferent to this question? Because it's counterintuitive. The planning commission, the finance commission member told this thing, and it's to me.
But this policy, you have not mentioned about this policy differences of the, for example, the last 10 years. How that affected the states, it's in differential way it is affected, isn't it? For example, some
The late 1980s.
because
From late 1980s or 1990s, the pattern is changing. Up to that, the Indian state was growing relatively, but then slowly started stagnating. After that, after the IMF loan and introduction of neoliberal reform, generally the public itself, they bought this idea that state should grow small, and government getting into business is bad. It's kind of the journalistic kind of things, that got into academic writings also in a big way. And neoliberal ideas got well entrenched.
I think it's a very interesting evening, but I have
Yeah,
no discomfort, only comforts. I'm trying to see how can suppose, because here no more friends here. All others are foes. Because if you're a friend, you will ask a question. That is a theory here. If you're a friend, you will ask a question. No, I don't want to preempt anyone's opportunity. Anybody? So I think what worries in a sense for you, you started with the OECD experience wherein developed countries have a larger government. That we thought they are advising us there will be no government at all, but it's other way around. So when it comes to here, we find what is called a premature government retreat. That is aggregate level that you find the ideally we should be, because you are at a lower stage of development, you should be getting a higher state, bigger state, but instead of it is actually state is withdrawing. When you break it up across Indian states, you find that still smaller, less developed states are actually having a bigger state. But the more you develop among Indian states, this Maharashtra, Bihar is a bigger state, but Maharashtra more developed, they have a smaller state. That is what worries. That's what actually worried you, isn't it? Am I right?
In a way.
Yeah, in a way. So I think when you are talking about this, this is what you are trying to see in terms of you are trying to put it in the overall context of globalization, the operational value chain, the private capital. That's one possibility. But in terms of the outcome, perhaps it is our excessive concern with equalization, wherein our paper recently that we have shown is that in the Indian context, the way in which the structure of the economy operated and this tax system functioned would invariably make a richer state having low tax capacity. So on the one hand, they have low tax base. On the other hand, this union will not give them much. They will give them low share. That there's a double whammy. On your own revenues go, and you are getting a lower. So naturally, they are left with a problem, and they work under the so-called stabilization FRBM. So you cannot go beyond 3%. But again, you would say they won't. Many of them even go that. That is actually this actually. If you want to really develop, you have to get out of this mode of what is called always equity, always facilitate catching up. Instead of that, you should also promote the performers. That we are not doing it. So far, there's nothing on that. So I think I have no answer on that. This is something which, but then I thought some disjoint connect one here, because when you came to local governments, there is a relationship between local governments and state governments. And the state governments are not as liberal like Kerala government to others. They don't give anything. In fact, here you get 28% of your plan fund goes to that. You go to some other states, it is maybe peanuts. Systems are not developed there. So I was thinking that when we are talking about development, now they are playing at three different levels. You have got OECD level, India level, and sub-state level. So I think that third level, there is a kind of disconnect. I don't know whether it was there. That's something which you want to kind of develop, that because your recommendations were more in the form of local level. And that is what I was wondering whether
the recommendations, the disconnect can be seen with respect to state governments as well as local. Governments.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The local economy may be booming, but the local government cannot.
Are not. Oh, you find the same thing here.
Similarly, at the state level, also,
Okay,
state
yeah.
economy is booming, but
Right.
They cannot mobilize.
They cannot mobilize.
So the solution will have to be found out. In the case of this urban population, see, the Indian production is getting concentrated, labor, capital, population, everything getting concentrated into urban areas. Urbanization is growing, and therefore, if you take distribution of urban
that is your
population,
logic. That's your logic.
if you take distribution of urban population for the general evolution formula as well as for devolution of local government grants, in both the cases, the use of urban population will benefit Kerala and Tamil Nadu and many other urbanized states, mainly the growth states. Similarly, if you take aging population, which through various GIFT studies.
I just wanted to add one more point here.
No, population, population, I'm saying. So the population, in fact, hides two types of dynamics. That is spatial dynamics of development and demographic dynamics. So aging is there behind the population, but then you will have to use aging. Age, that element should be taken into devolution formula. Similarly, urban population.
Bifurcating the population criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to add one more statement which.
No, some of these, Sabina is also saying that, no.
Sure, yeah. I wanted to add a statement which may be of relevance to you, which made me happy, but not good for the country.
No, I'll add one more point.
Uh.
Because one slide I didn't show, which I should have shown. In fact, no, one should be bothered about regional inequalities in the country. In many countries, many states, developing, there is a larger equity problem about which we cannot be insensitive. But as Arvind Subramaniam was arguing in his paper and all, see, in spite of devolution to liberal devolution, equalization to some of these states, they were not able to really get out of the problem of backwardness. So this problem will have to be addressed by making the system so unequal. You cannot solve this problem, but no, there should be some other way of managing it. That is in fact, now we are suggesting that there should be a global, the national program for helping these states to get out of their underdevelopment, where they should focus on core minimum services, education, public health, sanitation, drinking water and all. And in fact, Kerala can help or Tamil Nadu can help. No, it should be complementary because we have surplus educated people who can go there, train their teachers and all. So it should be addressed that way. Instead, what we are doing, we give a lot of money to the states like Jharkhand or Bihar, and they start IIMs, IITs, and then a lot of other investment. And you go to any central university, IIT, IIM, most of the students are from Kerala, and a lot of faculty are from Kerala. So it's a double problem. In Kerala, there is no IIT, there is no IIM. So if you want to go to an IIT,
I think this is a point which I made last week. We need to redefine the cooperative federalism, which is highly vertical, union and the states. We should have a cooperative federalism, horizontal cooperative federalism, wherein, you go to Indore, a beautiful city, no waste. Kerala, we don't know what to do with our waste. And our decentralization is world class. Our lessons could be useful for all the other states. So we should articulate that. And one point which I wanted to say is that I will conclude by 30. Nilesh, the last week, the Indian Chartered Accountant Association is a lawyer and the Federal Bank chairman, Nilesh was here. He was telling that, sir, this GST is completely becoming informal. Informalization, the country is increasing. He is a roaring practitioner in Chennai, in Mumbai. He cannot be telling without any evidence. In fact, I was under the impression that for a country like ours with this kind, such dominance of informal sector, when GST is coming in, an ordinary informal sector person will have one question, number one, whether to join or not to join. If I am to join, I will be putting my head under the arms of this bureaucrat. Yeah. Then I'll get. Then what has happened to the people who have put their head under the bureaucrats. Then naturally he will think the pros and cons of operating at my own informal network. So it's actually they tried with, in fact, they tried with those people. They tried with all the fake and numbers and all. Now it is thumb and all kind of stuff. It is difficult. So they are going by their own way. This is what he was saying. The system. So this GST, if the revenue capacity is declining, we have to look in terms of how the GST worked. This is our job. Huh? This is our job. I think to say. We'll stop. I think any questions? Any clarification, suggestion? Okay. I think we'll conclude. Right? Only more than 2-3 questions.
Maybe we'll continue the discussion in the car.
There's a large, reportedly, growth in non-divisible pool, while divisible pool is shrinking. That also has an impact. You have not mentioned that issue here. isn't it? Specifically in the
Yeah,
recent
It's
times.
not growing.
that's an important point which was mentioned. But,
That is your cess and surcharge thing you are
so,
talking
The
about.
pressure to reduce the size of the government comes in various forms, and then the concessions to corporates and various other things, and GST reform. All these things had affected, in fact, the divisible pool also, cess and surcharges and all. Yeah, they are all there, but many of these points are generally discussed, very frequently discussed in.
That is true. But in your,
I think we'll conclude by saying that we look forward to an outstanding paper, and Shaijan should every day spend some because both of you should work. We will be asking for the working paper. Now the point is that there's a deadline. There's a deadline that once you give a seminar, within a month's time, you must give the working paper. That is that is the institutional rule. Okay, yeah, 10 days. Oh, that's very good. Okay. I think we were able to give you one more. So I think these people have stopped this habit of formal out of thanks. But then when somebody makes such a, oh, come on. I think when somebody
One word, thanks.
yeah, I think when somebody made the afternoon so much a learning experience, I cannot afford to honor the rule of my coordinators. And on behalf of all those who have joined, and all those who have not asked a question, and all those who asked question, and all those who have learned, we thank both of you, Professor Shaijan, and we give them a big hand for that. Thank you. Nice.
Okay.